Okay, and how does your life change?
I get to see a lot of good shows. I get to see a lot of bands.
What are you seeing? Tell us everything. We like to hear this stuff. Tell us everything.
So I'm sat at home in my little apartment in London at the end of 1994, and I get this phone call from a promoter that I know because I take stuff to his club, right? And he's like,
When's the last time you dropped acid?
I'm clean at over 18 years, so it was a while ago.
Did you have a dream at the time? Like, what was your dream?
Do you know what, David? It wasn't like I just didn't want to be me. I wanted to be something, but I didn't want to be me. I'd been sent away to a boarding school. There was a load of sexual abuse. I've written extensively about that over the years in recovery, and the net result of all that was sexual abuse from the headmaster of the school.
Well, welcome to the show, Simon Mason from England. My first question is: did you know Annie?
We spoke. I think during lockdown, I did something for Dopey Birds. Yeah.
You went on the Dopey Birds.
I did, yeah. Yeah. So
how was it?
So we never met in person, but we met, on the screen like everyone was doing back then. I mean, it was great, and just another real sad loss to our community. The lady was a force of nature.
Yeah, true golden human.
Yeah.
And definitely. And I'm very excited to have met you. You came by the way of James Brooks of New Orleans through John Bucati to me. How are you connected to these New Orleans people?
Right. So in 1990, I went to see the Grateful Dead when they played in London for Halloween. They came to it turned out to be their last European tour. And I went to a Dead show. It was at Wembley Arena in 1990. Obviously, I was absolutely off my tits. and I met James at the show, and we hung out afterwards. And I think there's a very common expression, particularly in America, which is, how do you know when a deadhead's staying at your house? He's still fucking there. So that's kind of what happened, is that James came to stay at mine for like the night, and a month later, he's still fucking there.
Wow.
So we hung out a lot. I showed him, London as it was then, as a way of expressing his gratitude when he left. He gave me a sheet of white lightning acid, which he hadn't managed to quite get rid of. Not that he was pushing, you understand, or me.
I understand. Yeah.
Anyway, that was his parting gift to me. And then, obviously back then there's no internet and no cell phones. And he left me, I think, his mum's phone number, who was in New Orleans. And we're like, yeah, man, I'll call you next week. And, next month became whatever. And I mean, the interesting, maybe interesting is not the right word. So his parting gift to me, I was like on a mission then to go and, turn on my friends over here in the UK with some of San Francisco's finest, freshest LSD. I don't know about you, but when I'm taking a long journey on a bus, I like to drop some acid just to make it interesting.
When's the last time you dropped acid?
I'm clean at over 18 years, so it was a while ago.
So it must be a lot of bus rides without your proper style.
Well, no, because in the space of like a couple of years, I ended up getting arrested on buses for like all sorts of dumb shit like that, and I just stopped taking the bus. And then by which time I was like a full blown junkie, so I didn't go much further than the fucking phone box and the shop to steal shit, So anyway, I dropped this acid on the bus, and I was coming back to London. So it was like a 3-hour bus ride. So by the time I step off onto the streets of London, I'm so high, I'm just like, whoa. And I got stopped by a couple of cops, and they just looked at me and went, "You're fucking nicked, son." And they searched me, and they found what was left of this sheet, and I was in this police cell, and the walls were all like buckling, and if you're going to do acid, kids, try to not get arrested would be my
Right.
My top tip.
Stick to the buses and avoid the jail cells.
Stay on the bus, man. Don't get off the bus. Anyway, the years rolled by. I ended up 3 months later, and my lawyer here was like, you're probably going to go to jail for a while. I mean, back then in the early 90s in England, the whole acid house thing was really kicking off, and illegal raves and all that kind of stuff. So the authorities were handing out completely disproportionate prison sentences for anyone they thought was, at the center of that particular thing. I mean, I wasn't, but, So my lawyer was like, yeah, you could get 10 years. I was like, fuck that. I'm not going to jail for 10 years. So I hopped on a plane, flew over to San Francisco, hooked up with James, and took some more acid. And at some point during that evening, we were in some rave in a warehouse in Oakland. I kind of had this, what you might call a moment of clarity, where I thought, I'm not sure I actually want to be on the run in America for the rest of my life. I'm going to call my lawyer back in England and see what he thinks. So whilst I'm still fucking ripped on this LSD, I call my lawyer, and he's like, oh no, man, we've got the interview tapes from the cops that arrested you, and they didn't actually write down in the transcript of your interview that they'd asked you when was the last time you took some of this LSD, and you say very clearly about 3 hours ago, at which point they should have got a doctor to check you out before they carried on the interview. But guess what? They didn't do that. They just beat the shit out of you and left you in the jail cell. And so their whole thing is inadmissible, and I suggest you get on the next plane back to London, because I think you're going to get away with this on a technicality. And
awesome.
And I did. So that's how I met James. The years rolled by, we lost contact. This Dead show that we were at all those years ago, as I said, was on Halloween. And every Halloween since then, so we're talking 33, 34 years, I'd think about that show and I'd think about James, and I'd be like, what happened to him? And if you Google James Brooks, you get the guy who invented The Simpsons.
Yes, famously.
Yeah. And there was a part of me that was like, I hope that's him, man, because he's like fucking, he'd be like the guy that invented The Simpsons, and we're like buddies, and it wasn't him, obviously.
That would be the coolest thing if the guy who invented The Simpsons, you met him at the Dead show in London, he gave you a sheet of white lightning, stayed at your house, and wouldn't leave. That would be the greatest. What does a sheet of white lightning look like?
It just looks like a sheet of paper, perforated paper. That's it, with 100 blotters on it,
But no lightning bolts.
No.
Straight blotter.
This was straight out of someone's backyard in San Francisco. I don't think they cared too much about logos.
I met James and his brother John this summer, and they had a very big impact on me. But they didn't mention you, and I'm very disappointed that they didn't mention you, because you're such a good Dopey guy.
Not as disappointed as I am, the bastard. I'm gonna talk to him about it.
It's all worked out.
Yeah.
So there's so much to your story that I'm very interested in, but when a story is that I don't know what the word is, comprehensive, where does it start? Where does it start, Simon?
Where does it start? Well, I'm going to say it again. I wasn't born so much as I fell out, right? So I fell out into the world in what I describe as a fairly tatty English seaside town, which bizarrely, for about 10, 15 years, not all that long ago, maybe 10 years ago, became like the UK rehab capital. It was a strange old place. A lot of seaside towns, when people in the UK realised that they could go on holiday to Spain and have nice weather and not be in the fucking rain for 2 weeks, a lot of those kind of seaside towns fell into kind of, they were almost not abandoned, but no one went there anymore. And the smart money went, people were like, oh, we could open rehab centres because we've got all these old, buildings that are empty, and we could put a bunch of junkies in there and it'd be really cheap and da-da-da. So where it really started was when I was about 15, and my first addiction was gambling, because over here in the UK, they put these fruit machines everywhere, and in a seaside town, there were lots of them. So that was my first thing, was like, throwing my money away.
Wait, what's the seaside town?
It's called Weston-super-Mare.
Weston-super-Mare. Yeah. And all I can think of is Tommy and
Tommy's
and
holiday
seaside.
camp.
Yeah.
Weston-super-Mare is famous for a couple of things. Me, obviously, and it was also it was also where Banksy did his Dismal Land exhibition about 10 years ago. So I'd like to think that I put it on the map, but I'd say Banksy has a slightly bigger profile than me.
And what's a fruit machine?
It's a slot machine. You know, you just put your money in. It's just like a way of losing your money. You know? That makes nice noises while you do it.
Gambling is the one thing that never caught me because I'm such a loser. You know, I lost so much that winning just was such an aberration for me that I never got hooked on gambling. Was gambling a real thing for you when you were a teen?
It was just the first addiction. You know, it was the first thing. I mean, you know, I stole money from my mum's purse to go and play these fruit machines, slot machines, whatever you want to call them. You know, that visceral thrill of running into town thinking, this time it'll be different, this time I'm going to win, you know, and every now and again you'd win, but, you know, you've probably spent like £100 to win £1, you know, but that, of course, that's all you remember, right? You remember the £1 that you won, not the £99. And as a result of nearly never winning, and like you, I'm a loser too. Maybe I'm just a masochist, I don't know. But I was just caught up in it, you know. It was just, I was locked into it. What would usually happen once I'd spent all my money, I'd hang around with people and watch them spend their money, and I'd be catching cigarettes, and, you know, and then we'd go and sit in this cafe not far away, and this cafe was frequented by recovering addicts. There was a big, and it's still there in Weston-super-Mare. It's called Broadway Lodge. It's an amazing treatment centre, 12-step. It was the first 12-step treatment centre in the UK. It's been there 50 years. And so the first time I saw real addicts was we'd be sat in this cafe, and then there'd be this cloud of cigarette smoke, and these guys would all come in with shades and leather jackets. It looked like the fucking Velvet Underground had just walked in.
Right.
And my mates would be like, it's junkies, and I'd be like, they're so cool, I want to be like them, you know. So in answer to your question,
what do you think it was about the junkies? How old do you think you were when you first spotted this scene?
So I'd have been about 14, 15, and
right,
you know, there was just something that, it was just like I said, it looked like the Velvet Underground had just walked into the cafe, man. They had shades, they were smoking, they just looked different, you know. From my town is just like, you know, any other town, really. You know, there's not a whole lot going on, and some people like that, you know. I remember clearly another acid trip, sat on a bench in the high street of my town, going to myself, well, this is when I was like 14, 15, going, see that guy over there, that's me in 5 years, that'll be me in 10 years, that'll be me in 20 years, see that old guy over there, that'll be me. Now, some people like that, you know, but I didn't want that, you know. And so I think seeing what appeared to be very exotic bunch of people coming in, just, there was something, it resonated.
It's funny, though, the Velvet Underground, because the famous thing that's always said about the Velvet Underground is that everybody that ever went to see them started a band. You know, as opposed to them being like the biggest band in the world or selling a bunch of records, they would catch people probably like you or me, and and we would see them and be like, I want to be like that. But the world didn't see them that way. No. And I think for me, when I saw them, and I never saw them play, you know, they were done before I was born. But when I heard them, I was like, I want to sound like that, because it sounded like they didn't really care. And it sounded really like chunky and funky and bluesy, but they didn't really care enough to sound too polished. And for a neurotic like me, I was like, that's attractive to me.
I think they made it sound like you could do it. You know,
right.
it was punk rock before we had the expression punk rock. You know, I mean, much as I loved going to see the Grateful Dead, they never made me want to be in a band, because I'm like, how the fuck do you do that? That's like really, what, a 2-hour guitar solo? Nah, you know. But I think that whole thing with the Velvets, and, you know, that bleeds into the Dolls and all that. You know, I'm talking to a New Yorker here, so, you know, I'm just giving you props, man. You know, it was that sequence of, I think, bands and stuff that just made it look like I could do that, you know.
What was how old? You said you were 14 where you took that dose and you were like, I see me here, I see me there. How old were you when you first got high in the first place?
About that age, 14, 15,
okay.
That's when that kind of all started to happen. You know, I'd been sent away to a a boarding school. I somehow passed some exam, which meant, we didn't have any money, but my mum didn't have to pay. And she, bless her, she passed away a year ago, and she just thought that was.
I'm sorry for that.
No, she was 91, man. It was time, it was, she was old and very unwell. So, but back then, I think I'd been sent off to this Catholic boarding school. It was all very much thou shalt not, and, there was a load of sexual abuse. I've written extensively about that over the years in recovery. And the net result of all that, the sexual abuse from, the headmaster of the school, he was a priest.
How does that happen? I thought you said you were Jewish before we started.
So my ancestry is Jewish, right? But my dad's dad was Jewish. My dad's my grandfather on my dad's side, his first wife was Jewish, his second wife wasn't. So that's it. They're like, okay, it's not maternal. You're done. You're out. Yeah. You're out. You're out. I mean, I lived in a Orthodox. So in London, we have an area called Stamford Hill, which is just like Williamsburg. Lots of ultra-Orthodox Jews, and a lot of my neighbours back then. I'd be like, listen, I've been Jewish for longer than you fucking have, man. I can trace my family back to Spain in the 15th century. So maybe that's part of the problem, the confusion of like actually having the Jewish DNA. My mum was very kind of Protestant, Church of England, Christian. I get sent to a Catholic boarding school. Is it any wonder I ended up a fucking junkie,
How does the headmaster approach you at all? Like, how does that happen? And I'm sorry that happened.
How does that happen? So, the Catholic Church, it's not exactly headline news, is it? This has been part of what's been happening for centuries, I would say. And when you're in a school kind of stuck out in the middle of nowhere, and they're running the school and there's no outside influence coming in, pedophiles and sexual abusers, they look out for each other and they protect each other, and the collusion that goes on kind of allows these kind of things to happen. Now, my dad passed away when I was 11 suddenly, and my world just fell apart at that point, and of course, to a predatory, to use the American word, pedophile. That's like
I like it. I like it when people use their local thing, like intestine, and
local
pedophile, and
aluminium, not aluminum.
Yeah, I used my aluminium foil this morning, wrapping up my daughter's bagel. Anyway, keep going, please.
So there's me, 11, lost my dad. My mum lives a couple of 100 miles away. I've been put in the care of this institution. He's the headmaster of the school. They're Catholic priests. That's like, red rag to a bull, right? Here's this vulnerable kid, and they zero in on that.
They have a whole school of vulnerable kids. Like,
I was really cute.
You still are, Simon. But what I mean, like, and I don't want to unpack this thing, but it's obviously an experience that you're not the first person this happened to. Like, I went to public school in New York City, and I wasn't particularly cute. Nobody noticed me. So how do you get noticed by the headmaster, and what does he do to you? Like, if you don't mind sharing what happened, because I'm sure it changed your life.
Just to answer the question, what it did to me is it removed my ability to trust anybody for many, many that's the long and short of it, because the grooming process, I mean, these people are quite sophisticated, some of them, they're not unintelligent people. They're very sick, evil, if you want to call them that, whatever, I just call them sick, sickos, whatever. So they are quite sophisticated in how they make their approaches. So it started off, in my case, with, there'd be a note pinned to the notice board. Simon Mason at the headmaster's office. I mean, I was already getting in trouble for stupid shit, smoking and whatever, when I was 12, whatever. So you get called to the head's office, and it's, late at night, and the rest of the school's kind of sleeping. Looking back at it now, I was like, that's a bit of a red flag, I would say. And then the headmaster is telling you how sad he feels for you for losing your father, and what a tragedy it must be, and would you like a cigarette, and we won't tell anybody. So the secrecy begins. And that goes on for a little while, and then they add a little shot of whiskey, and that's another secret, and we're not going to tell anyone about this, and I understand, Simon, and And this goes on for a while, and all of a sudden you're in this, you know, I suppose in rehab they'd call it an exclusive relationship, right? It's secret. And we were in small dorms. There's only 2 people to each dormitory. It wasn't like there was 100 kids lying in a dorm. And the kid that I shared a room with would go home on weekends. So there am I one night asleep, and old fucking whiskey breath suddenly appears out of nowhere like fucking Nosferatu, you know. And we're not going to tell anybody about this time, and so that's how it starts, you know, in an environment where to show any kind of vulnerability will result in something bad happening. So those schools, we're not, I don't know if, you know, people think that these, like, it wasn't like a famous English public school. It was a fucking shithole, but it was a private school that I'd fluked my way into by an exam. It was vicious. You know, I mean, I learned a lot of my survival skills that I would use in later life on the street. You know, I learned it there. You know, don't show any vulnerability. You know, you got to try and either entertain people or be good at sports or make people laugh or whatever. You know, you've got to come up with something. Otherwise, they're just going to fucking eat you alive, because it's like everyone's swimming in this same pool, you know, of just trying to survive. It wasn't an education. It was, well, not in the traditional sense, you know.
You learned about survival.
Yeah.
And the headmaster, he, I mean, like, did he have sex with you? Did he force you to do sexual things to him? Like, was that
the latter? You know, there was a lot of fairly uncomfortable, you know, fumbling around, and yeah.
And do you feel like, oh my God, like, does this mean I'm gay? What does this mean about me? Like, what's the shame as a teenager?
I think being a teenager is quite confusing anyway, right? I mean,
totally.
That's why I like The Who so much, because like Pete Townshend just described it so well, and that's why I fell in love with that band. But maybe we'll come back to that.
Yeah, definitely.
So yeah, you know, there's this kind of like, okay, is this my fault? What have I done? What, you know, I can't talk to anyone about it. That's absolutely not going to happen. He was eventually removed from the school in a very quiet. We went back to school, I think, for like our final year when I was 15, and he just wasn't there anymore. By which point, I'm already smoking, drinking, getting high, doing speed,
taking acid, right? Totally.
Listening to fucking The Who.
Who was the first person you think you told that story to?
I would say, it's a good question. You're good, man. You've been doing this a while. You're good. That's a really good question. I would say the first person that I told it to, honestly, actually, as cringy as this might sound, was a sponsor that I had years ago.
It's not cringy. I mean, but that's exactly the nature of the thing.
I told parts of it to people, you know, and in my active addiction, it was like part of my sob story that I would use to manipulate people's emotions. You know, what happened to me, and if what happened to me, if it happened to you, you'd use as well. You know, it became very much part of my defense mechanism. You know, particularly when you're in rehab and you're in like peer assassination group and someone's like digging you out going, and you're like, yeah, well, were you fucking abused? You know, it's a fuck off, you know. It's like, we're not going there.
Was peer assassination group ever a real thing? I think we should bring that back.
Well, I mean, they didn't actually.
We should do peer assassination Zooms.
Yeah,
it would be a trailblazing new thing.
Yeah.
So when is the first substance you remember taking in all that?
So I mean, nicotine's a fucking right. I mean,
yeah.
You know,
yeah.
So
I miss it.
Yeah, I'm back on a vape at the moment, but anyway, that's whatever. So I mean, nicotine. This is a fairly predictable trajectory. I'm sure you've heard it a ton of times. But so nicotine, alcohol. So in Weston-super-Mare is in the southwest of England. So it's famous for lots of things. People with eyes that are too close together and webbed fingers and shit like that. But also producing a version of cider which is called Scrumpy, which is basically, back then in the early 80s, you could buy a gallon of this stuff for like £1, and that would get 8 people absolutely shit-faced. And if you held like the container up to the light, you couldn't see through it. There's bits of shit floating around in it. You know, it was like sewage. but just overly fermented apple cider, and it's not moonshine, but it didn't, it got you absolutely wasted.
Worked.
Oh,
it worked.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So the scrumpy was the beginning. The scrumpy, is it because it was scrumptious, and that's an English thing?
It certainly wasn't scrumptious, but it did the trick. 1 pint and you were drunk. And 2 pints you were throwing up everywhere, and 3 pints you were in the hospital.
So what was first, speed or weed? Or
weed?
hash, because it's English.
Hashish.
Weed first.
Hashish, yeah. You didn't see weed in the UK really very much back then, early mid-80s. It was Moroccan hashish, and obviously, we rolled that with, papers and tobacco. And then, like most kids, you get to an age like, I'm going to make a bong, and then you just become like bong maker supremo, and it's like whatever kind of bong you could cobble up, just like obsessed about making the perfect bong.
What was the greatest bong you made in your heyday? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do.
Did you guys name? Did you name the? In America, the idiot stoners often would name their bongs.
Yeah.
In England, was that a thing?
Yeah. So we went. My friends and I went to the world famous Glastonbury music festival. I went for the first time in 1986, so I'd have been 17. We had this.
Who's playing in 1986?
Headline act was The Cure.
Oh my goodness.
Van Morrison, because he was like that all the time. Psychedelic Furs, the Waterboys, who I will speak about a little bit because I named my memoir after one of their songs. I didn't see anybody else. I was too fucked. But I saw The Cure. Anyway, so for that Glastonbury, we had this 5-gallon glass bell jar. We drilled 6 holes in it, and out of each hole came 6 lengths of hose pipe. And we put, 3 gallons of water in it. And then we had this big pipe coming out the top with a gauze that was about 3 inches deep. And if you fill that up with a lump of hash and some tobacco, that got you pretty fucking stoned. And we called that Dr. Octopus.
Yes, Dr. Octopus. Yeah. I'm sure many people in the Dopey Nation had some hookah they named Dr. Octopus as well.
Yeah.
What about speed? What was the speed out there? Was that the white crosses and the bennies?
So we the local.
You see, all of my English stuff comes just from Quadrophenia. Yeah. That's all. That's all I've got.
It's not a bad reference point for I mean, I still got the same hair, No, so the English version of the Hells Angels. So that famous video of the Rolling Stones in Hyde Park, back and they had like the English Hells Angels. It's like pasty face, pimply, skinny, fucking them, right? So not like the guys out in San Francisco with guns and shit. These were anyway. Their thing was making speed in the bathtub. So they would make their own amphetamine, and it basically stunk of like cat piss, and it was kind of damp when you first got it. And you could buy it by the gram or the ounce, whatever. That would keep you, a gram of that would keep you awake for a couple of days, no problem. So that was the next thing. So, cigarettes.
What did they call that?
Speed, just speed, whiz. People just called it whiz, and people would either shoot it or put it in a cigarette paper and bomb it, or try and sniff it if you really wanted to hurt your nose. It was kind of, but it did the trick, and it was cheap.
What's the first thing you shot?
Coke. I mean, as we're going through this now, so I ended up living in Los Angeles in 1986. So a few months after I'd been to Glastonbury, do you remember standby tickets when you could just turn up at the airport and just pay some money and you'd wait for the next available seat on a plane, right? I mean, to the kids these days, that sounds nuts, right? You just go to the airport, pay some money, and then they'll shout when they've got a seat for you, and you can spend the rest of the time waiting in the bar getting drunk, right? So I ended up in Los Angeles in 86, walked into, the crack epidemic. I lived in Venice Beach, and, the obviously the gangs down there, the Venice Shoreline Crips, there was the Venice 13, that kind of got, not involved in all that, but there was some of them living in my apartment block, and we were like, cool, we used to kick it, we used to hang out, because to them, I was just this like crazy English kid. I wasn't like the enemy. I was nobody's enemy.
I'm sure to everybody you were this crazy English kid.
Well, that is true. Also true. So
let me ask you this though: what made you go to LA? Like, what were you looking for?
No idea. Fame and fortune. I actually probably thought that I'd get off the airplane at LAX and there'd be like a welcoming committee of people because this English person's arrived, and they'd be like throwing rose petals in front of me going, "Welcome to Los Angeles, Your Highness." You know, I didn't know there was like 250,000 British expats living in Southern California. I didn't know any of that. I'd originally flown to New York, then I went up to Boston, and then it started to get cold and I ran out of money, and I was like, no way I was going back to England. I'd only been away like a month or so, and I couldn't face the sort of shame of, I failed in my quest to whatever it was I was trying to achieve. So I kind of thought, well, if I'm going to freeze my arse off, I might as well go and be broke in California. Didn't know anybody. Just so I spent the last few dollars that I had getting a plane from Boston over to California. That's where I spent the next couple of years.
And how did you like set up in California, in Los Angeles? How did you set up in that apartment with the Crips? Like, how did that happen?
So I found an English bar. It's no longer there in Santa Monica. There's a really famous one called the King's Head. It's been there forever. It wasn't that one. It was an English pub called the King George, and it was right at the bottom end of Santa Monica Boulevard, almost on the beach. I just chanced upon it and went in, and there were all these English people. I was like, fuck, there's not just me then. There's a lot of those English guys. So this was, like I said, 86. They'd all been to Mexico for the World Cup, the football. It's fucking football. Sure. It's not soccer, right? Yeah. The football World Cup that year.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Which was infamous for a number of reasons, in as much as that it was the first time England had played Argentina in a game of football since the whole nonsense in the Falkland Islands a few years previously. So, and what was going on in England at that time was Mrs. Thatcher was taking apart the country, and dividing it up. And so a lot of heavy industries were being closed, the mining industries, steel industries. So a lot of traditional working class industries were being decimated. And a lot of these dudes had sort of taken their redundancy money and just gone, fuck it, let's go and follow England in the World Cup and have a fight with the Argentinians. I mean, that's the truth. I ain't even making that up. I remember speaking to them, they were like, yeah, we couldn't fucking wait to get over there, bastards, have a fight. Good old English football fans. So a lot of these dudes had gone there, gone to Mexico, which is where the World Cup was, and then copped a bunch of after the World Cup had finished and brought them up to LA and just stayed in LA and were working on building sites and doing whatever they were doing. So I just walked into that. Basically, I just walked into this pub. A man walks into a bar and
you're like 18,
18,
17.
yeah, 18.
Yeah, and you're like, fuck it, I'll be in Los Angeles.
Mate, when you're 18, you're just indestructible, right? I mean, especially when you've done a lot of coke. It's like,
Did you have a dream at the time? Like, what was your dream?
Do you know what, David? It wasn't like I just didn't want to be me. I just didn't want to be me. I wanted to be something, but I didn't want to be me. I didn't really feel, not surprisingly, comfortable being me. So I was just looking for an identity. And I guess, I didn't even know Hollywood was in LA, right? But when I found out it was, I was like, hey, I'll be an actor. I could be famous. I could be somebody, right? And I ended up actually doing a lot of work as a TV extra. I met another English lady in a supermarket one day, and she happened to run this talent agency, and she got me a lot of work. And I was in The Naked Gun. You remember that film?
Who were you in The Naked Gun?
Oh no, man, I was just background artist,
Which scene? When O.J. Simpson gets run over by the steamroller?
No, when the Queen comes into the banquet and she gets slid down the table. I was dressed up as an American Marine.
That's fantastic.
So I was in that.
Classic American cinema at its best.
Yeah, it was great. And I actually hung out with Ricardo Montalban when we were filming, and he was just such a fucking dude. He was cool as. So I did a lot of that. I was in a TV series called China Beach, which was
I knew, with Dana Delaney. They played a good song at the beginning of that show. What was the song at the beginning of China Beach?
Well, I can't remember the song, but the episodes that we shot with Nancy Sinatra in them, and so we were all dressed up as GIs. We'd get on set like 7 a.m, get absolutely stoned to fuck, get dressed up as GIs, and then give us these M16s full of blanks and just go, right, run over there and shoot shit. I mean, it was
they always had you as American military, huh? Oh yeah,
Well,
the song they played was the Supremes, Reflections.
Reflections.
You know that
Yeah,
song?
right. There you go.
Reflections of the way life used to be.
Yeah, but I was the right age to be a GI. I was like 18, 19. I looked the part, right? I mean, so I did a lot of that. I was in Moonlighting. I was in Fame. I say I mean, I was like in Blink and You Miss Me.
And were you meanwhile becoming like a prodigious crackhead of Southern California?
Well, here's how that happened. So whilst I was shooting
Whilst I was shooting.
Whilst I was shooting The Naked Gun. Yeah. I've watched that movie a couple of times since, right? And the only thing I really remember is I was on set and I'm talking to this guy and I remember him as this old guy, right? He's probably 10 years younger than I am now, but when I was 18, he seemed like an old guy. And we snuck off somewhere to go and smoke some pot. And then he says to me, he said, "Oh, you want to do some blow?" And that blow is a term we use for weed in England. And I was like, "Well, we just done some blow." And he's like, "No, coke." I'm like, "Yeah, fuck it, why not? You know, we're on set." He said, "The problem is we're not allowed to talk." I'm like, "Okay, how hard can that be?" No, I'd never done coke before. Right?
Wait, what does he mean? What does he mean you're not allowed to
talk?
Well,
when you're on set, you know, as an extra, you just have to shut up and just sit around and read and not bother people, right? I mean, you're like the lowest of the low, you know, you just, background artist, whatever.
And that's hard to accomplish whilst
when you've just done a fucking line of coke the side of a baby's arm,
right?
And you see Ricardo Montalban, you go up to him and go, the plane. That shit doesn't go down too well. Anyway, turns out this guy is a bit of a low-level coke dealer, and he gives me his pager number, and he's like, "Look, Simon, if you ever want to, shift some of this to me." You realise, I hope the American authorities, by the way, I regret all this, by the way, if Donald Trump, if you're listening, I don't do that stuff anymore.
Right? He's not coming after you. Don't worry about him.
Yeah, well, he might. Anyway, so long story short is I hook up with this guy and he's fronting me eighths of coke and I'm going to the English pub to sell it to the English guy. And all of a sudden it's like, now I've got an identity. I'm the crazy English guy with the good coke. Great, I ain't gonna lie, it was a lot of fun. Most of my mates back in England were unemployed. Fucking sat around in a bedsit somewhere, like reading fucking Charles Bukowski, wanting to have this kind of crazy life. And I was, by accident, I was doing it. And the apartment that I ended up living in, there was a bunch of us living there. It was kind of like a doss house, people just came and went, whatever, and we kind of paid the rent. It's if you've ever been to Venice Beach, it was right on Westminster and Speedway, which is like right on the seafront there, right on the front. And on the front door of the building was this plaque. Jim Morrison used to live there back in the 60s, right? So we were like, let's do loads of acid and pretend to be Jim Morrison, right? Like you need an excuse. So it was all good. It was fun. We were young. We were stupid. We were crazy. I was having a good time. I kind of didn't really want to look at what was going on in my neighborhood because there was a lot of people getting shot. The crack had really kind of hit and it really landed in that. So by day, Venice Beach was, the guy on the roller skates playing guitar and people juggling 10-pin bowling balls and all that. Nighttime, a whole fucking different fucking thing. And
during the day, it's like you're in the movie The Doors, and then during the night, it's like you're in Boys in the Hood.
Precisely. Right, and the guy that was supposed to be managing our apartment, sometimes he'd buy a bit of coke off me and sometimes I'd buy a bit of him. We just had this kind of symbiotic relationship as long as I paid the rent. And there's this one weekend comes up and I haven't managed, my guy hasn't paged me, I haven't got any blow. So I go up and knock on his door and he opens the door and he's like, and I'm like, Bob, I remember his name, Bob. Got any blood? No! Slams the door on my face. And I'm like, he fucking has, bastard. I can tell he has. He's absolutely off his chops. Banging on Bob! So he opens the door again. He's like, you don't want to come in here. I'm like, I fucking do. So I go in and he's smoking crack. And I sit down and you know what? There was a part of me that went, you should probably not do this. I was looking at Bob and then I'm looking out the window and it's dark and there's a gunshot going off somewhere. Like all the omens are not good, right? And, you know, you see, or I saw back then, people at night, you know, in Ghost Town in Venice, you could see what crack was doing. And yet, you know, I'm an addict, right? So it's not going to happen to me, is it?
Well, that's also the first time I've heard you mention that there's any sort of fear of consequence. Every other time you've used in this story, it's like, oh, that'll be fun, that'll be fun, that'll be fun. And this time it's like, maybe this won't be fun.
Well, I don't know about you, but if you'd never like smoked crack and then you walk into a room with someone who's probably not been to sleep for 3 days, right? It's not the best version of them, is it, that you're going to find?
Right. It's scary. It's scary,
so it's kind of hard to,
dangerous.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to gloss over that, you know. I mean, I'm not that smart, but I'm not that stupid either. But at the same time, you know, he's got some and I haven't, and so fuck it, it's not going to happen to me.
I feel like I ask this question a lot, and maybe I've asked it less lately, which is like, when do you start to feel like, oh shit, I'm an alcoholic, oh shit, I'm a addict? And it sounds to me, it's like as soon as you say, yeah, I want to smoke crack.
Well, so so that's what I ended up doing that night, and you know what, I'd never been as high as that in my life. There's a reason why people smoke that shit. The next day, and not just the next day, but for the following 4 or 5 days, what I now understand or would call the obsession is fucking all over me like a fucking cheap suit. You know what I mean? It's like, whoa, whoa. Nothing had had that effect on me, really. I mean, you know, you take a hit of acid and you're tripping for 24 hours. When you finally come down, you probably don't want to do it straight away. You might want to give yourself, I don't know, half an hour or so before you do the next one, right? Or whatever. But I was obsessed from that point onwards. I knew that it was on me, you know, in a big time.
When that happened, how much coke were you selling out there? Was it like, were you making a living? Were you doing well?
I was, as would be the case for the rest of my career in that particular field, I kind of did enough that I could have my own.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? I listen. Yeah. I was never driving around in a 3 Series BMW, you know, dripping in gold. I was an addict that was using, and for 75% of my career doing that, it was just about making sure that I had enough for me, you know, and I was fairly fucking greedy, like we all are. So I never really saw it as a way of making money. It was just a way of not running out of.
No, I get that. It's the answer to the equation of how do I keep getting high.
Yeah.
So you decide you enjoy the crack, and how like far into that do you fall?
So within 3 months of that episode, I'd also got my roommate kind of heavily into it because he had a job and money coming in. So, you know, you got to take a hostage, right? Particularly if they've got a regular paycheck.
Yeah.
So we're just at it all the time. Some of the possessions that I'd accumulated, you know, in that prior to that, they soon went. I mean, you've heard this story a minute. I mean, I was just feet first straight away. You know, I just went boom. I got arrested a couple of times. I didn't end up in jail, but I did a couple of weekends in the police station, and I got arrested downtown LA in a car that I knew was stolen when I got the pink slips off these two bumfucks from fucking wherever they were from that tried to sell me this Chevy Monte Carlo for like $50 with like Iowa plates on it. You know,
yeah.
That's a stolen car.
It's too good to be true.
Like, a great car. Fucking great car, man. Like,
how long did you have it for?
2 weeks.
Right. Those are the best, though.
Yeah.
So like, how far into the crack abyss of Los Angeles do you fall before you're like, I got to get out of here, or do you get deported? What happened?
So what happens is the weeks and months go by, and I'm just a crackhead. You know, I'm just out there every day trying to get money. I've been arrested a couple of times. I've got a warrant. You know, I think I had like an illegal green card and a pretend social security number. And the phone, guess what? I'm not getting the phone calls anymore to come on set and hang out with Ricardo Montalban, put it that way. You know, I'm not turning up for stuff. it's getting pretty dark pretty quickly. And one day I had this, my roommate's car, he had this like, I think it was a 65 Dodge Dart, man. Kurt Cobain had one of them, by the way. I found out recently.
Cool car, for sure.
It was a weird fucking... Anyway.
Dodge Dart is a cool car, I think.
Yeah, I loved it, you know?
Yeah.
Had this kind of lever on the left for the gears. And anyway, yeah, so I sold the car. I sold my roommate who had basically kept me alive, you know, and kept me in money for the previous year or so. I sold his car because I'm a crackhead, right? That's what you do. And I sold the car.
Dart?
Yeah, I sold the Dart, yeah.
How much did you get for it?
$500.
Yeah.
Got $500. Back then, before, you know, when airline travel was less regulated than it is now, in LA, there were these like expat English newspapers that would come out every week. And in the small ads, you could buy the return journey of someone's round trip flight. So someone would fly out from London, decide they're going to stay, and then you would buy the return portion of that flight. They would take you to the airport, they would check in, give you the boarding pass, and you'd get on the plane. Imagine that now.
The good old days.
The good old days, right? So I sold my friend's car, and
why did you want to go home though?
Because I didn't want to go to jail. I didn't want to die. I was, you know, I was in a bad way, and the only way out I could see was to go back to my mummy's house. Yeah, I'm still only 20, right? I'm not like...
What was the bottom though there that made you be like, I can't do it?
I think getting a gun pulled on you when I'm from England. We don't really do guns here, you know. I'm not saying there aren't any, but we don't really do guns particularly. And I had a couple of incidents where I'd gone out on the boardwalk at 3 a.m, you know, walked into Boys in the Hood, right? Or Colours. I was in that film too.
Yeah. Menace to Society. That's the one.
That is the one, yeah. And I'd gone out there, you know, to score, and I'm like 19, 20, you know, I'm from this small town in in England, right? I'm not fucking gangster. I'm an addict, and some guy just pulls a gun on me, and he's got like a bottle of Old English, you know, tucked in his fucking pants, and a gun, and he's out of his mind, and he's just pointing this gun at me, just because I'm there, you know. In much the same way as a good junkie can always get a bit of credit from his dealer when you just trot out, oh, please, you know, when the shit hits the fan, we somehow managed to pull up something, right? And I somehow convinced this guy that shooting me in the face wasn't what he really wanted to do. And I think I actually kind of put it to him like that. Listen, you don't want to, I'm from England, mate. I'm not your, you know, I'm not the enemy, whatever.
And that was enough for you. You were like, what the fuck am I doing here? Why would I die in Los Angeles at 20?
Well, it was die, be shot, or end up in the county jail. And I kind of had an idea what would happen to a fairly cute 19-year-old English kid in the county jail. And I didn't want that either.
Were you starting to think, holy shit, maybe I need to get sober, or does that not cross?
No, man. No, I was a victim of circumstance. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. You know, I mean, I could see the crack was a problem, right? I mean, you know that. So anyway, so I sell the Dart. I buy the ticket. I buy a lump of crack. I have my last crack pipe in the toilet of the plane. Get this, the plane that I flew home from LAX, right? Pan Am, right? Dropped me off in London, flew to Frankfurt, got turned around, and then got blown up over Lockerbie.
Oh my God.
I was on that plane, right? And so a few days after I've landed, the plane, you know, it's refueled, and then it's blown up in Lockerbie. That was Pan Am, that flight. I remember watching the news. I got back to my mum's house, and I had this little room at the back of my mum's place on the mother of all come downs, because I didn't know that there was a come down of crack because I hadn't stopped smoking it for 6 months, you know. And I'm watching this plane and the news, and I'm just thinking, wow, man, you know, got a bottle of whiskey in my hand. For some reason, I thought maybe I should just go and see the family doctor, right, and see if they can help me, because I feel really depressed. My dreams of whatever they were gone. So I went to see the doctor, and I told him some of the truth. You know what it's like, right? You know, I'm telling everything, dude. He's a fucking doctor. He won't understand. I'm trying to get some Valium from him, basically. He says to me, Simon, I suggest you stop taking, try and drink a little bit less, and get yourself a good job, and then you'll be fine.
It's good advice. steady advice.
Steady advice to a normal person, right?
Right. And what do you say? What do you do?
I just looked at him and said, "But can you give me some Valium? You know, I need something, because I need something, right?" And so this is.
Well, you also didn't tell him that you had just come off of 6 months of crack smoking, and you probably did need Valium. You were probably like crazy, anxious, neurotic, all those things from the post-acute crack syndrome.
Anyone would think you'd been there yourself.
Yeah.
Very good description of it. So, but what I walked into back in the UK at the end of 1989 was the whole rave thing and ecstasy. Right, so the idea of, I went to an NA meeting. He did say that. So he said, listen, there's this thing called NA. Maybe you should go to that. So I went to this one meeting, and it was full of middle-aged people talking about God. I was like, fuck that. Old people, right? 40-something. And someone said God, and someone said abstinence, and that was me, done with that for the time being. And so I ended up back in London, and I had a great time. You know, we're all doing loads of pills and ecstasy and going out to clubs.
When do you stumble onto the first rave, and that's the Hacienda scene? That's that whole.
Well, that was kind of Manchester, but London was doing its own thing. You know, there was lots of what they used to call warehouse parties, and they were all kind of illegal, and it was a truly remarkable period in British culture. And I say British because it wasn't just England, Scotland. I mean, they're all fucking mad up there as well. You know, they don't fuck about when it comes to either.
Tell us all about the experience and the culture and what it's like to happen into it.
Well, so I bought my first ecstasy tablet I was at the Glastonbury Festival again. What year was that? That was 1990, I think. Yeah. 90.
And who was on the bill for that one? Van Morrison and who else?
Van Morrison, Elvis Costello. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you who was on the bill. It was a band called the Happy Mondays, who were from Manchester and had come straight out of the Hacienda and that whole thing, right?
Right.
So I'd somehow got myself a job working for the BBC at Glastonbury. I was just like a gopher. Simon, can you go and fetch that? Can you go to that field? And there's a cow that's escaped or whatever.
It's a good gig.
It was a great gig. Best job I've ever had. And so I got paid a bit of money, but I got this access all areas pass. I mean, I'm literally like, I can go anywhere. On the stage, not a problem. Main stage, not a problem. Wherever. Look at me with my pass. And I think I swapped a half sheet of acid with someone, and I hired this motorbike off this guy. And Glastonbury back then was a very different thing to what it is these days. You could ride around the site on a motorbike, and it was more like I imagine festivals like Ultimate to have been. Just everyone's just whatever. Anyway, so I'm and as a result, having this access all areas pass and knowing a lot of the people that put the festival on, I know where all the good are. And so I have this link between where the good are and where the pop stars hang out, because they never go outside of the VIP area. They're too fucking scared to actually go and see the festival. You know what I mean? They're like pop stars. They wouldn't rock stars. They wouldn't be seen dead tramping around. Whatever. So that
they wanted though, right? It became a very useful go-between.
So that's when things really changed. So I found another identity, right? I called myself, I had this big leopard print hat, this big fedora, and I became the Cat in the Hat at that particular Glastonbury without kind of going into too much detail. One or more of the members of the Happy Mondays had more than a passing acquaintance with heroin, shall we say. And that's always the one that you can't really walk around anywhere in the music industry, anywhere as far as I'm aware, or a festival and go, anybody got any smack? Because, people just walk away from you. Quite rightly so. in fact. Whatever. They don't know. But I did know people that did have some. And I'm stood there backstage, and Bez, who's the dancer from the Crazy Dancer from Happy Mondays, is standing next to me. He's got a big joint in his mouth. So I'm like, hi man, how you doing? So we share a joint. I guess he's just checking me out to make sure he can ask me what he's about to ask me. So he asked me, hey, I don't suppose you know where I can get some? And I'm like, well, funnily enough, I do. Hop on my motorcycle. I will take you there. It's almost like it was ordained, right? A higher power moment.
Listen. If you've ever been a heroin addict, that question is the most common question that you'll ever ask. And I mean, I would travel the country and say, I don't want to freak you out, but do you know where I might be able to get some heroin? And if anyone ever said yes, I mean, even you telling me this story, you know, I haven't done heroin in a million years. You telling me this story and Bez asks you and you say yes, I'm very excited for Bez. I feel happy that you're going to
disclaimer
connect him.
Disclaimer, it wasn't for Bez, right? It was
okay.
Just in case Bez's lawyers are listening. I've met him since.
It was for.
He can't remember.
I'm happy that you could provide a heroin addict or user with heroin. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, it turned out well, really. It was a win-win. So he jumps on the back of my motorcycle. We zoom across to the other side of the festival. I introduce him to Psycho Mike, who is the dealer with that particular substance. Psycho Mike makes a ton of money. I drive Bez back to his tour bus, and then he says to me, I don't suppose you want to shift some of these pills that we've got, do you? You know. So I'm like, I think that would be fair recompense for what I've just done for you. So he fronts me this bag of, you know, freshly minted pills from Manchester.
Ecstasy.
Yeah.
What does it look like?
So they were called speckled doves. So they were like a fairly crumbly, fairly thick tablet with a little dove on the front. With
the Ecstasy I would get in New York all had doves in the beginning, but they were white. They were white.
No, they were white, but a little bit speckled. Well, anyway, they were and will always remain, because I'm probably not going to do them again, the best tablets I ever took in my life. And that was the first time I'd done an E. And it was exactly the right place at the right time. At a festival, and of course I had a lot of friends that were very interested in you know, taking some off my hands, so to speak. So the Cat in the Hat, as I became known, was kind of born out of that random situation.
Do you think there's any significance to the dove on the tablet or no?
Yeah, peace, man.
Peace, right? Peace. You feel good.
Listen, I'm not the first person to say this, but you know, in the sort of 70s and 80s, the late 80s, you know, young men in this country spent more time beating the shit out of each other than they did anything else at football. It was an epidemic, you know, football violence and violence in pubs. You know, we are, as I think Julius Caesar once called the British, these animal men. Like, we're not all like fucking Basil Rathbone in Sherlock Holmes. You go, Watson, fetch me the opium. You know, it's like, right. Put a drink inside British people and they just want to kill people. Right.
I think it's very important that you say this. So then this ecstasy movement in England.
So it changed all that, right? It absolutely changed it. So people went from, you know, knocking shit out of each other because they were born 5 miles apart and supported a different football team, to standing in a field off their chops on ecstasy going, I love you, brother, nice fucking shoes, man, where'd you get the coat? You know, it changed everything completely and utterly, like seismic. You can't overstate it.
So do you become this major MDMA
no, listen, major shaker? No. What I become is the same thing I told you already. It was like, I become a guy that can sort of get this for you and and make sure that he doesn't have to spend his own money to support his burgeoning addiction.
Okay, and how does your life change?
I get to see a lot of good shows. You know, I get to see a lot of bands.
Tell us everything. We like to hear this stuff. Tell us everything.
So I'm sat at home in my little apartment in London at the end of 1994, beginning January 94. And I get this phone call from a promoter that I know because I take stuff to his club, right? And he's like, listen, Simon, I know it's a Wednesday night, mate, but I've got this band from Manchester playing tonight and they're driving me mad for a bit of coke. Just don't talk like that on the phone. You know what I mean? Don't call it Coke, call it white wine. You know, like that's gonna get you out of fucking jail, right? Anyway, we were all stupid, and my phone wasn't tapped anyway. So I can't really be fucking asked to go and drop off an eighth of Coke to some fucking band from Manchester that I'd never heard of when I'm at home with some aluminium foil and the TV. It's like, why go out? Right? I'm cool here. I'm chasing the dragon. I'm fine.
Hold on, wait. When did you start doing heroin?
Oh, towards the end of 89, 90, I had some friends that were, let's just say, a few months further down the line than I was. Yeah, I kind of took to it kind of immediately, smoking it. I mean, you know, if you want to just take the edge off a 3-day, you know, bender of Coke and booze, then, you know, smoking a little bit of heroin on a tin foil, I mean, that's not going to do any harm, is it? Right? You're not going to become an addict.
I was on heroin forever. I smoked crack probably 3 times and it didn't do it for me, and I never became into it. Like one of the guys that would sell me methadone, I would go over to his house and he would always be smoking crack, and I would hit the crack and I'd be like, okay. But with heroin, I was like, I want this. I never want to feel anything besides this. I want to stay like this forever.
Hey, listen, I believe it or not, I was the same. I didn't like cocaine. I didn't like crack. I mean, I fucking done a ton of it. I didn't like it. But when I first smoked some smack, oh my God, like you know, I was like, this is the way forward. This has to be, because everything's all right now, everything. So, you know, we talk about trying to find that identity, right? Mm-hmm. Now I've got it. This is a bit of me. Everything is fine. Everything else on my plate becomes like meat and potatoes. It's just gravy, right? My main thing is that. But it was a gradual kind of thing, because, you know, I'm making enough money to not run out of anything. And there was a kind of gentle kind of slide. And again, going back to the state of the country at that time, you know, everybody's fucked on in a way that we've not seen and will probably never see again in this country. And I don't mean in the way there's a fentanyl epidemic in Philadelphia. I mean, people partying. I'm talking about partying, and there's no come down yet. Everybody's collectively going up. If you look at the cultural flow chart, right, in the UK, so, you know, in the 20s, people, you know, were for rich people. And in the 30s and 40s, no one had any money and there was a war, so we didn't really have any. And then 50s, people are smoking a bit of reefer in the jazz clubs in London. And then the 60s happen, and quadrophenia, right? And everyone's going up. Everyone's taking Purple Hearts and French blues, and the spike is an upward spike, right?
Yeah.
And then by the end of the 60s, everything goes a bit psychedelic and barbiturates, and people start to come down. And then the first wave of heroin addiction in the UK really kicked in towards, you know, the very beginning of the 70s. And then
was it related to Vietnam?
No, not really. The geographical kind of influence, shall we say, of heroin didn't really come to a decade later. So it was more to do with hippies traveling and going to India, Tibet, Nepal, and maybe bringing bits back. It was by no means an epidemic. And also, at that time in the UK, you could go to your doctor and be given a diamorphine script.
Right, that's what I was gonna say. You ever read the Crowley book, Diary of a Fiend?
Yeah. So you just go into your doctor.
They're all right, and you just get the morphine and right.
And you talk to, you know, I've got some friends of mine in recovery that are in their sort of mid-70s now that were in that scene in the early 70s in London in particular, and Piccadilly Circus, and, you know, all the junkies knew each other, because like a lot of those Vietnam veterans, you know, in New York, they kind of knew everybody. You know, everyone knew everybody. Right. Everyone knew who was holding or who wasn't, right?
It also the way that the addiction spreads. Like, you might have some hippies who are like living this lifestyle, then you might have some like patients, and then you have these weird people who wind up becoming patients, and then they kind of hit the hippies, and then the soldiers show up, and then all of a sudden everything is fucking covered.
Yeah. And when they criminalized addiction in the UK, when the war on they didn't call it that at that point happened, that's when things got worse. Didn't get better, it got much worse, And so as the cultural flow went, then, the sort of 1976, going back to our friends of Velvet Underground and New York Dolls and the Ramones influenced, Malcolm McLaren, the Sex Pistols, punk rock, blah, blah, blah. And everyone's playing guitar really fast and it's speed. Amphetamine arrives again and everybody goes up again. And then you have, the fall of the Shah of Iran in Iran. And a lot of the people that were in cahoots with that regime, the one that the Ayatollah Khomeini was going to kill everybody who was involved with the Shah, they all had to get the fuck out of Iran really quick. And you ain't about to bring your possessions with you when you've got 24 hours to leave. But if you've got a diplomatic bag and you can get a couple of kilos of heroin in there, you're going to be all right when you get back to London for a couple of months. And that's actually what happened. A lot of those people that fled Iran after the fall of the Shah brought in a lot of smack. And then they brought in a lot of smack to a country that was going through, as I've already said, the collapse of industry in Liverpool and Manchester, up in Scotland.
All these working towns, right? Working class.
And so, you want to find a good place to sell heroin, go to a place where no one's got a job.
Right. That's the story of it here also. Where do you start hearing, just, as a professional in treatment and stuff and being addict and somebody who's very interested in the story the way that I am, I never heard the Iranian Shah story. Like, where do you hear that story?
So I knew some people. I bumped into addicts that were Iranian, so there are Farsi-speaking NA meetings in London for people that come from that part of the world, and they have, to this day, there is a pocket of Iranian addicts in North London where opium is a big thing. Now, I never came across opium in my life in the UK, not in its pure form. I bought some shit that people told me was opium, but
me too.
But hey, it's not instantaneous enough for me either. I haven't got the patience for it. It's a lot of fucking about.
Who's the first person that gives you the heroin?
So I have, and he's still my friend to this day, and he's been clean a long time too as well now. So I think I'd come back from a long weekend raving somewhere. I hadn't slept for 2-3 days, pretty standard kind of pills and coke and whatever else. And my friend, he'd been using smack for a couple of years at that point in a very low-key kind of way. It was kind of, we just didn't talk about it, put it that way. It wasn't a conversation we had very often. And I just remember sitting up with him and we were discussing The Who, because that's one of my favorite things to talk about is The Who. And he is a musician as well, and I was like trying to get a band together and we were talking about The Who. And then I remember it like it was yesterday, he said, "Do you realise Pete Townshend wrote My Generation when he was 18? And I think I was 20 at that point. And I just thought my life's over. Like that's it, my life's over, because he wrote that when he was 18 and I'm old now, it's over. What's the point? What's the point in even having a life after that revelation? And that might not make sense to some people, but it makes sense to me. And my mate Matty sat there with his aluminium foil, and I just went, "Kiss a go on that." And he looked at me and went, "You sure?" I went, "Yeah." All of a sudden, the fact that Pete Townshend wrote My Generation when he was 18 didn't fucking matter anymore.
It didn't bother you anymore.
It didn't bother me the slightest.
Right. It's funny. It's like, when did it bother him? Like that story, like the classic Pete Townshend story in the 70s where he's drunk at the bar with Steve Jones and yelling at him, "Who are you?"
Yeah. You got a good song out of it, though.
Yeah, sure, but it all bothered him too.
Yeah.
It's just funny. He was the guy who did it, and yet he got bothered by it in exactly the same way that you and Maddie did, I think.
I met him years later in I won't say in recovery because that would almost blow his anonymity, but I just did say that. But we met once, right? He's probably the only person that would leave me lost for words, if I'm honest. And you can tell already that I can talk. Like I'm good at talking. And we met. We had a mutual friend. I've still got a scooter. I've got this amazing Lambretta, and I had a different one back then. So I'm a bit of a mod on the quiet. I'll send you a picture of it. It's nice, my scooter. Anyway, So I was outside one of those places where people like me and you go from time to time, right?
Sure, yeah.
And I'd been in a meeting. Sorry, I've been in that place.
You can say the meeting.
Whatever. I've been in the meeting.
There's a lot of loopholes. Yes.
Yeah, I've been in the meeting, right? And I was a few years clean at that point, and my daughter was 18 months, 2 years old. We had a band in London, an NA band, and we were playing, conventions, and it was great. It was fun. We were playing Velvets and Dylan and Bowie and The Who. Really, we were really good. We were called the Should Be Deads. We actually played the World Convention in Barcelona.
Killer.
Which was fucking, anyway. So I'm in this meeting and I'm sharing all this gratitude, like foaming at the mouth like one of those annoying newcomers that we are when we're like, everything's fucking great and my best day is using it as good as my worst day, all that nonsense, right? The meeting finishes and I go outside, I make a roll up, ciggy, and I'm sat on my scooter and this really tall person comes sort of out of the sun. He's got the sun behind him so I can't really see him, and he's like, loved what you said in there. I'm Pete. And I looked up and
shut the fuck up.
And I look up and I'm like,
what'd you say?
Nothing, right? And he said, I love what you said about your daughter and this band that you're in, because we'd just come back from playing this world convention, right? And it was an amazing experience, truly one of the greatest nights of my life. That was an incredible thing. And he said, tell me about this band you're in then. What do you do? So at which point I tried to be smarter than Pete Townshend and quote one of his lyrics back at him. And one of my favourite Who songs is Join Together. And there's a lyric in Join Together. It's the singer, not the song, that makes the music move along. So I'm the singer in the band, right? So I just said to him, oh, well, according to you, I'm the guy that makes the music move along. And he went, oh, you're the drummer. Just like without missing a beat. You're not, it's Pete fucking Townshend. He's very clever.
You want to hear something really weird? Like, I got really sick recently. And I took NyQuil. I actually had hernia surgery, and I was on oxycodones, and then
That's one of the things we've got in common, by the way.
What, hernia surgery or oxycodones?
Yeah, hernia surgery.
Yeah. And I took NyQuil, and I had this dream. Whenever I'm like, I guess since the oxycodones, I've had a lot of serious using dreams. And I had this dream that I did heroin, and I got really high in the dream, which rarely happens to me. And I had to go to treatment, right? And I go to treatment, and it's like this star-studded treatment, and like Danny DeVito's there, and this guy who was at our Dopey festival, this guy named Zach Clark was there, and I meet a bunch of people, and the next thing I know, I turn around and Pete Townshend's there. And I'm like, and for me, like, Pete Townshend is probably number 2 on my all-time Dopey wish list. And I would say Dylan is number 1 for no reason other than like I want to try to make Dylan not weird. Like that is all I want to do with my life. Yeah, it's never going to happen. That's my big dream. Yeah. And me and Pete get into this conversation and he could tell that I'm a little too much of a fan. And he's like, all right, I'll see you later. And he walks away. And then he comes back and he says something to me. And he's like, if I don't see you, it was nice to meet you. And he gives me this hug, but it was a bad hug. You know how when some people don't give a good hug, they give kind of like the little, that's the kind of hug he gave me. And he's doing this musical version of Sid Arthur right now. And with his wife. And I reached out to his wife on Instagram because like, I figured maybe that was a way. And in the dream, I said to him, oh, I reached out to your wife. And he gives me this look, Anyway, enough of the Pete Townshend. I got to get Pete Townshend to come on the show. I know I could do it. I know it's possible. I don't know how to do it.
I think it's possible.
But let's get back. We took a terrible side path. You're on heroin. A band from Manchester wants you to sell them coke. And how strung out on heroin are you in that era?
Well, you're only strung out when you haven't got any, right?
For sure.
So
how many times have you not had it? I mean, you had enough because of your Cat in the Hat business. You had enough money that you're not really running out.
Right. So I hadn't had the experience of being strung out at that point. So we're a couple of years in, really. I mean, look, it takes a little while to cultivate a habit first time round. It doesn't like happen overnight, and then you do some, and then it takes a little while. And again, because of the amount of everyone was doing here in the UK at that time, I wasn't using smack every day, but I'd have a few days and then there'd be a load of ecstasy, then there'd be something else, it was just whatever, But by this point, by the time this band from Manchester are driving my friend mad for some Charlie, we're at the beginning of January 94. He rings me back, the promoter's like, please. So I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. Anyway, I go to the venue, and the band happens to be Oasis, doing their first ever London show. So he says to me, you know, I sort the promoter out. He said, do you want to stay and watch the band? And I'd heard about them in the music press, and I'd kind of thought, well, they were okay. I'll give that a go, you know, whatever. So I'm in this tiny club, holds 180 people, stick around to watch the band, do a little bit of business with the people that I know. You know, it's like, so far so normal, right? It's just, that's what I'm doing at that point in my life. And they come on, and I'm just, my jaw's on the floor. I'm like, wow, what? This shit's like, this is my Who, Beatles, Stones all rolled into one. You know, I just fell in love instantly. I mean, you only really see Liam, you know, everyone else isn't, you don't really look at them, because why would you? Because you've got him, a 21-year-old Liam Gallagher with a voice which at that point there was no one could touch him. No one, you know. I'm like, I have to meet these guys. So I watched the show, and I am literally speechless. And that had happened a couple of times in my life, but usually off watching something on TV, you know, when you're like, oh, wow, that's amazing.
Well, it's like we come into being a fan of like The Who or Dylan way late. You know what I mean? They're already done. Like, you were in a very good situation. Like I had the potential of being in that situation a couple times, and I missed it because I was so closed off from new experiences. So the fact, like, I worked at MTV, like when Nirvana played there before Nirvana was Nirvana, and I just like, I'm not going. I like gave the tickets away. I could have seen Nirvana in like 1991, like in MTV with 100 people, and I was too closed off. So your experience, like, I love this story. So you see them and it fucking touches you.
Man, they just blew the doors off that place. There was something just so, I'm like, well, this is now. As much as, you know, like you've just said, we came to the party with those bands from the 60s way late, you know. This was like right in front of me, happening now. And I knew that. I actually knew this was going to happen. I'd seen a ton of bands, you know, that's what I spent most of my time doing, going to shows and, you know, doing what I did. But there was something about that. So I hung around afterwards, and I introduced myself, left them a little calling card, so to speak, and said, if you need to talk to me when you're in London, you know, here's my because I had a mobile phone at that point. Not many people did. Dealers had them mainly.
Oh, you were a dealer.
Well, you know, you can call it that if you want. The next day, the phone rings, and that was it. We were, and I want to be really clear about this. Listen. They were off doing their thing and touring, and I did some of that with them, and then I'd be home. It wasn't like I, you know, was an integral part of that. I played a little part in it, you know, for the next 18 months, 2 years or so. So I was up close to watching a band do something that I don't think will happen again, because we live in a different world now, you know. From playing a club, the 150 people, to within 2 years, playing these 2 shows in Nebworth, just outside London, where 250,000 people were trying to buy tickets for a show. You know, that won't happen again.
Well,
not in rock and roll.
I remember when I was in college, Wonderwall came out.
Yeah.
And I was
hate that song.
Well, for me, I didn't know about Oasis. Like, I would watch MTV 120 minutes, whatever. And when I heard Wonderwall, there was something about it that I liked it, and I also liked all the Beatles iconography, and the song spoke to me. Like, it spoke to me, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. But like, you were on the scene, but I never was an Oasis fan. But then I saw that movie, Supersonic came out, and I watched it. And I fell in love. Like, I just fell in love with the band, the story, the film, and the story that you just told of going from 150 people to those crazy shows in 2 years and watching it. And the fact that
that's what Supersonic is about. It's about that period. So that's what I saw. I saw that happen.
And what's it like to be because also, like, when Nirvana played at MTV, I was nobody. And I wasn't part of anything, and I didn't feel like I had anything to offer. You were kind of a fixture in the scene where you could recognize, holy shit, this is something, and I kind of belong here, and I can be part of this, which is cool.
Right, so like I said half an hour ago, trying to find that identity, right? You know, you asked me, did I have dreams, right? Well, more by accident than design, I'd found my place in the world at that point. You know, I was reasonably well connected in the Britpop scene, you know, the music industry in London back then. I knew where Psycho Mike lived, you know, to get that, and I knew where all these people, you know, so I became this kind of, you know, go-between, right? And I was good with that. I enjoyed that, you know, I saw some great stuff. I actually met Kurt Cobain, you know, a couple of times for reasons which I don't think I need to explain. There was just something about him, and I just thought, this guy ain't going to make it. There was a sadness to him that I'd not experienced at that point. I became, unfortunately, all too familiar with it myself, you know, in a few years down the line. But so I had this place in the world in London, you know, it was fun. London was a great place to be. There were bands, you know, everyone you knew was in a band, and da-da-da-da-da. By the time the Nebworth shows happened, which is in 96, my heroin habit was, to quote a phrase probably from the Big Book, was making my decisions for me.
Right.
I went to Nebworth. I was there. I had a big old, I'd switched from smoking. I was like now shooting up. I had a big old hit before I got on the train up there. It's like an hour out of London. Get to the Nebworth. It's a big, you know, 150,000 people. They're not on till like 7 p.m. There's a whole bunch of bands playing during the afternoon. I get all my backstage passes and and I'm mooching around the backstage area, and I thought, you know what, I'm just gonna have a little hit just to keep me, you know, tidied over for the next few hours. I go in to one of those god awful porter cabin toilet things, you know, that they have at festivals. Pull some out of my pocket, and the first thing I pull out is a little rock of crack. So I'll have a quick go on the crack, and then I'll have a nice hit afterwards just to take the edge off it, right? That's kind of how I did things. So I smoke this rock, I go back in my pocket to find my little baggie of heroin, and guess what?
It's gone.
It's not there. And you know those moments that we all have in life, particularly in addiction, where the camera pans away and you're there just going, oh no, you know. Because I knew we're like in a field in the middle of fucking nowhere. There's nobody there that I can go up to and go, you got any smack? Just, you can't do that. It's not allowed. It's the one of the hypocrisies of all this, really. You know, you got any coke? Yeah, got any this, got any that? But you'd have to be very, very delicate and know somebody that was holding, you know. Now, nobody goes to festivals to sell heroin, right?
Maybe that should be a new industry. So what did you do?
I went home.
You just left.
I just left. It was like a no-brainer. So, you know, they're on in 3 hours. I haven't got any heroin. Fuck this, I'm going home. And I did.
And you missed the show.
Missed the show, yeah.
Now,
so that was August 96, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm aware, you know, we could talk all night. That was the beginning of the end for me. But
hold
the
on,
end
do you need to wait, do you need to go? Or are you rushing?
No, I'm just saying, I'm just trying to put a timeline on me, right? The significance of that moment was up to that point, you know, you talked about not noticing consequences and just crashing on through stuff and Up to that point, to a certain degree, I'd kind of managed to keep things, you know, I'm spinning a lot of plates, right? But I've got a habit, but you know, if you're an addict like me, you know, you pick up a load of coke and you think, well, if I cut this to fuck, I'd still get the same amount of money and I'll have more, you know. That's what was starting to happen. And so, you know, your reputation goes from being the cat in the hat who has the best of everything to, I heard he's a junkie. Oh, that's really weird because I bought some coke off him and it wasn't very good. You know, this is what happens, right? So the world starts to turn, this world where you're everyone's best friend, all of a sudden, or in a very short space of time, people's tongues are wagging and da-da-da, and did you hear that? And I heard he ripped somebody off and da-da-da. And the phone stops ringing. And those guest lists that you were nailed on, no problem. Yeah, of course, no problems. Plus 20, mate, all right? Me plus 20. Yeah, not a problem. That stops happening. Nobody wants to hang
you
out.
lose your status. I have lots of questions though. First question is when did you start injecting the heroin in the first place?
93, 94.
Do you remember it?
Yeah.
Who were you with? Like, what was the story?
I was with the same guy that gave me the fucking smoke the first time.
Maddie?
Maddie, yeah. Hi, Maddie. Yeah, I spoke to him yesterday. He's good. He's all right.
Good. And was that like life changing, or you saw him using it and you're like, what the fuck? I'll give it a go, kind of thing?
Well, I was already shooting coke. I'd done that, right? And like I've said, bizarrely, it wasn't really my favourite thing. I like the build up to it, you know, the excitement of like, but I kind of had made a point of not actually learning how to get myself at that point. I was kind of like, it was like damage limitation, right? I thought, if I can't actually shoot up myself, then I'm kind of limiting the amount of I can do, because, you know, you start shooting coke, it's very, very Moorish, you know, you can go through that shit really fast. So I'd hooked up with Matty, I had some coke, he had some smack, and he went, why don't we just put the two of them together and then we'll be top of the tree, right? That's it. You know, I don't want to, it's not a competition addiction, right? But for my money and my experience, shooting a really nice speedball, there's nowhere really you're going to go after that I'm aware of. That's it. That was the one, that was the holy grail that we read about when we were kids, that, you know, Keith used to do, and whoever, you know, and the only ones in all these bands, that Velvet, whatever. That was it, right? That was the fucking holy. So that was it. Me and Matty had that experience. I guess really, it's kind of downhill all the way from there.
Right. It can't maintain the expectation of that.
Well, you're either going to die or well, anyway. So so that was the first time.
I feel like personally, I think I only shot like a handful of speedballs, but when I was in LA, I had gotten way not into it, but my best friend was on meth. And then I got back on heroin, and I just started shooting meth and heroin because I figured this was the most proximity I would have to something like a speedball.
Yeah.
And then I found like I would just put less and less meth into the concoction, and I was like, okay, you know. And then so like when you're dealing with, and I just need to ask, how do you meet Kurt Cobain? Like what is where he needed dope, or he's in England?
Yeah, essentially, you know, and I was very friendly with a guy called Evan Dando at that time.
From the Lemonheads.
Yeah, me and Evan were, because we were similarly afflicted. I don't think that's a secret, you know. We were similarly afflicted. So we were part of that Oasis entourage, Evan and I. Whenever he was in the UK, you know, we'd hang out. So, I don't think I need to join the dots on the relationship that we had with that and his friendship with Kurt. And they were very fleeting encounters. I'm not saying we hung out, we didn't, but
no. And I'm just curious as a fan and as somebody who loves rock and roll stories. I know in the Supersonic movie, I think it's where I heard Noel talking about how much he loved Nirvana and loved Kurt Cobain, and then he says he wrote Live Forever because he thought Kurt Cobain was so negative, and that he wanted to put a positive spin. In dealing with Oasis, and just as a fan, as somebody who's never met them, what is that like, knowing them when they're so young on the way up? Like, how well did you know them? Like, were they cool? Was it nice? Was it fun?
And it was wonderful. You know, to see something like that happen, which, like I've already said, I don't think will happen again. You know, to go from 150 to 150,000 in like less than 2 years, right? Just in a different world, pre-internet, pre-fucking Instagram, you know, just whatever. To be around that and see it happen and see the crowds getting bigger and see all the crazy behavior and all that kind of stuff. But the thing that I was hiding from in myself was that, like I guess a lot of people, I wanted to be him. I wanted to be Liam, like every fucking young guy did at that time. You know, I wanted to be him, but I couldn't be him because I was too busy being a addict.
And also, he's very special. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like he was him because he was him. You know, it's the same thing about anybody, and it's not to say that anybody's better than anybody, but he has a thing, you know,
absolutely,
which is very special. And so you talk about August 1996 as kind of being the mark where you're like, I have a fucking problem. I mean, my shit went on forever. I was a TV producer at MTV2. I produced this dumb little special and it was called MTV2 Presents Handpicked Volume 2.
Yes.
And it was like Norah Jones and Coldplay and John Mayer and
no wonder
and
you want
whatever.
heroin.
Well, I was
listen to
already on
Coldplay.
heroin. But that was the thing. I had this opportunity to go out to Jones Beach and interview Coldplay. And I had I guess it's similar in some ways in that I go out there and I interview Coldplay and I ran out of heroin and they invite us to stay and have dinner and hang out. And I was like, no, I have to get back. I have to leave at this moment right now. I'm not staying because of the same reason you left Nebworth, because you knew you couldn't be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a similar story. Similar.
It's a great get out clause, kids. If you're listening to this, if you're ever at a dinner party and you need to leave, just say, I'm sorry, I've got a heroin habit and I haven't got it. I have to go home. Right. Everyone will be understanding.
They'll understand. And conversely, if you ever find yourself with a heroin habit someplace where you don't have heroin, you should leave.
Yeah.
You should leave right away.
Yeah, exactly.
So 1996, August.
Yeah.
You're like...
My 27th birthday. So August the 10th, to be precise. It was my birthday. Nebworth was on my birthday.
Do you go home and do you have heroin at home?
Of course, yeah. Well, I have a dealer. I have a dealer who has some, Dirty Dennis. Yeah, so
Dirty Dennis and Psycho Mike. Were they friends?
No.
No.
They lived a long way from each other. But Dirty Dennis was like, he's clean and in recovery, by the way. Hi, Dennis. He was like, he was Dirty Dennis, man. It was like bottom end dealing, like McDonald's teaspoons. Remember them? You'd fucking get like plastic. Yeah. We're not talking fucking Pablo Escobar here. We're talking about if you can get a tenner, if you can run out of your local Walmart with a stuffed turkey and a bottle of gin and get 10 quid for it, you go and see Dennis.
Right, Dirty Dennis.
Yeah.
So talk about the end of your run.
Well, that was the beginning of the end. I got clean in 2006, right? So that was the point where my fantasy world, the Cat in the Hat, the guy that was at every fucking club in London, at every gig, was mates with this person and that person and blah, blah, blah. That's when it fell apart. And it fell apart really fast because, like I said, word got out that I was just some fucking junkie now and da-da-da. And, culturally, as I've mentioned, everybody had gone up again. The flow chart, everyone was back up. The narcotic cultural UK flow chart, everyone was high and up and ecstasy and da-da-da-da-da. And, what goes up, right, must come down.
Must come down, yeah.
And there's a great book by a guy called John Harris called Britpop, The Last Party, which, if you've got any interest in that kind of period in England, it's as good as my book, which is called Too High, Too Far, Too Soon, by the way. And he references this kind of thing, so we'd be going to parties, and there'd be, oh, look, there's so-and-so from that band and so-and-so from that band, and then there'd be like a room in the party, it was a house party, where people like me would be. I had this moment where I was at this party that belonged to one of the members of a band called Elastica, who was, they were notorious for throwing great parties, and this particular person had a nice house, the publishing money had come in and they had a few quid and they bought a nice house. Halfway up the stairs at like cash point o'clock, like 3 a.m, where everyone's going to the cash machine to get more money to buy more Coke or whatever, I'm stood there talking to Jarvis Cocker from Pulp, who I knew, we knew each other. And he says to me, and I won't try and replicate his accent because I can't, he said, oh, upstairs, it's all a bit dark up there, Simon. Are you going upstairs or are you going downstairs? And to this day, I don't know if he knew the sort of accuracy of what he was saying. It was like a metaphor, right? And I was like, I'm going upstairs, Jarvis. And he just sort of looked at me and walked downstairs, because upstairs was where those of us that had habits, that was the part of the party where it was a different kind of party, right? Yeah. That's where all the darkness was going on. And that all happened over that summer, the summer of 96. And I found myself with nowhere to live. I found myself going into detox for the first time, just on the street.
What made you turn up? Well, was it because of what you're talking about? Like, you have a habit, you're cutting all your people don't trust you anymore to buy off of you. You're probably using more than you're selling, and you run out of money.
All that. That's exactly it. And it's like you've been there, my friend. So that and the thing, the really painful thing is that, all these people that you kind of always knew they weren't really your friends. You kind of knew that, right? But you were hoping that you were wrong. And then you find out that you weren't wrong and that you were just some fucking 2-bit dealer that, someone else has taken over now and the phone's not ringing and, people walk past you in the street and they don't make eye contact and you're scurrying around Camden Town in London trying to get 20 quid together by stealing some fucking turkey and a bottle of gin out of the fucking store and going to see Dirty Dennis, and it's like, it's over. There's no, and then, there were crisis. There was a place, in fact, I was talking to on my website, which if you watch the video on my website, there's a clip from a TV show where I meet one of the nurses who worked in this detox center, and I've never met him clean. So when you get time, if you go on simonmason.net, there's a video clip and there's the full episode, and I meet this guy. It was filmed last summer. He was one of the nurses in this detox facility that it was the only place in the UK you could self-refer. So you could call them up and go, look, I'm sleeping rough, my habit's out of control, I'm fucking gonna die, I owe this yardie a load of money and he's trying to kill me, I'm in crisis. And they let you in, and you go in and you get a detox and a bed for 21 days, and it was all paid for by our wonderful National Health Service. You'd have an opportunity to perhaps make some better choices. They'd offer you rehab, you're like, I don't need rehab, I just need to stop taking heroin. Have you heard of NA? Fuck that, it's full of fucking religious fanatics, I'm not going there, that's for fucking idiots. Who's going to do that? No one's going to do that, that's not for me either. And thus begins my 10-year attempt and another attempt. I mean, I ended up in rehab 7 times. I did 14 inpatient detoxes. And, whilst I think I have to say I learned something from all those experiences, I wasn't willing to admit to myself that just perhaps those fucking idiots in the 12-step program might actually have a solution for me.
Do you have any good trying to quit stories, rehab stories, like some dumb adventure that happened in a detox or rehab? Those stories are usually very great.
Well, no, I mean, those were always places of refuge for me, right? Mm-hmm. So, this is where I was at. So the point I'm at now in my using is that I found another Dirty Dennis, Horrible AD he was called, and he lived in this caravan on this...
Wait, horrible what?
Horrible AD. AD,
like 80. Okay, 80.
Right, horrible AD, smelly AD, whatever it was. But so he lived in this caravan on this housing project in East London, which is where I was now, skulking about. And he was one of those addicts that always had the phone number of someone that was on. Right, so if you try your guy, phone's not on, try another guy, not on, all right, I'll go and see fucking Horrible AD, because he'll know someone. And obviously, in return for him finding someone that was holding, you had to give him something, right? So far, so fucking normal. So I go and see AD this one time. I'd just come out of a detox, right? I'm like, I'm just going to go and get high, fuck it. I've had 21 days off. I've had some respite, right? That's what it was. I had some respite. And now I'm 21 days, off the street. I'm 10 days off my methadone detox. If I'm going to, it's going to be great, man. Imagine that first hit when you're fucking fresh out of detox. Remember that one, right? So I go and see AD, and sure enough, he knows someone, and we score, and I have a hit. Obviously, in his caravan, there's no toilet. It's just a little fucking caravan, a trailer, I think you call them in the States. And there's no electricity, and it's late at night, and I nod out. The next thing I'm aware of is AD, who's nodded out on the other side of the caravan, going, "Oh, Simon, you're on fire, man." And I kind of and I've leant over this candle, and I've got this kind of big old parka on with the furry collar, and sure enough, I'm on fire, or my coat's on fire. And all I can think of doing is, like I said, there's no toilets in Eddie's caravan, so when he needed to go for a piss, he'd just piss into a bottle. And there's this big 3 litre of AD's fucking 2-day-old piss. I'm on fire. What am I going to do?
Douse yourself with 80's piss.
So I pour 80's 2-day-old piss all over my head and go back to gouging out quite content. That's what the next 10 years was all about. That, you know, and when that became unbearable, I'd go to this detox again, and they'd say, oh, do you want to go to rehab? And I'd get the pamphlets for the rehab, and they'd all go, you know, wake up 6:30 a.m. Fuck it, I'm not going there. You know what I mean? Fucking ridiculous. I'm getting up at 6:30. And then there'd be like 12-step ones I'm not going there because that's abstinence. You know, just trying to find something that I thought would work for me, when actually the reality was none of that was going to work for me because I wasn't done. Do you know what I mean?
How did you find yourself done? Like when did that happen, and do you remember how that came about?
Yeah, I do. I remember it very well, and if I ever forget that, I'm in fucking trouble, right? So at the beginning, that's what the next 10 years was all about. It was
How homeless were you?
I was on the street, or I had an apartment, but then I'd rent my apartment to a dealer, and I'd have to, you know, I was just, I mean, you know, I had a girlfriend, I got married, you know, I'd have these periods of sort of coming out of rehab and sort of being a bit clean, but having a little cheeky drink every now and again, and then, you know, and I'm just using again, and I'm hiding it, and it was 10 years of the worst 10 years of my life, and also the worst 10 years of anybody that cared about me, you know, and there were people, you know, my mum, bless her, she never saw any of this, she was a long way away, but my sister and my first wife and friends, they were just like, what's he fucking doing? Well, what, you know, every time I'd go into the detox, I'd be like, right, this time I'm done. You know, I'm always going to quit when I'm high, right? I don't know about you. Once I've had a big hit, tomorrow's the day I'm going to, you know, that's me, right? And then
it's such a hard thing, even to hear about, like, years later, like the fact that you can tell I was never homeless. Like I was never homeless, but I went to probably the same amount of detoxes.
I'm sure.
And I don't know how many rehabs. I don't think I went to 7 rehabs. I probably went to like 5, but I went to like untold detoxes, and I didn't know when it was going to happen for me. Like I didn't think it could happen for me. I never wanted to get sober until I did, which was long after anyone had ever said to me, you should probably get sober.
Yeah.
When did the magic bullet hit you?
So that's what, like I said, the last 10 years was that kind of stuff, right? We all know what that stuff's like, right? We've all done that, right?
And but, Simon, I need to say this. I appreciate everything you've said up till this point. Like, I love hearing your story. And I want to say something that's going to be kind of annoying, which is that I know that I told my story, like wherever I would go, I would be like, oh, I was on MTV when I was a kid, or oh, I did this, or the Coldplay, or whatever it is. And like, I'm sure every treatment I told somebody that story, you know, like how many times do you think you told the Oasis story in over the years?
Well, yeah, too many.
But it's not. It isn't though. I don't say it to shame you, because it's a very special thing you got to do, and I don't mean be Oasis's connect for some blow.
Dude,
or whatever.
let me tell you something, right? Okay, so I was young, you know. It was amazing, you know. Seeing that happen was amazing, but unfortunately for me, addiction reduces my fairly sort of basic intelligence to that of a fucking puddle. You know what I mean? I don't make good decisions, right? I'm just driven by the next one, whatever. So here's something that I'm going to drop another name on you now, right? So in the mid-90s, I spent a lot of time in the city of Bristol, which is, you know, the southwest of England. And I became friendly. One of my oldest friends had a roommate who he'd just appear out of nowhere, this guy, and I'd be like, all right, mate, And we became friends. And I'll get to the name in a minute. He wanted to leave Bristol and move to London. And this is all in my 10-year descent towards accidentally getting clean, shall we say. And he was not pleased that I had a heroin. He could see that it was hurting me. He was worried that I was dragging his best friend into my own fucking murky world and all that kind of stuff. We had a couple of fist fights in the street when I turned up at his house and I was loading on heroin and da-da-da. Anyway, we're sat in a pub in Soho in London a few days before New Year's Eve 1999, and this guy says to me, he said, "Simon," who used to call me Dodge, "I want you to be my manager. I think it would be really great. You're really good at hustling and I need someone that can hustle for me." And I finished my pint of Guinness and I put it on the table and I went, "Mate, there's no money in graffiti." Do you know who it was?
I'm going to guess it was Banksy.
You're absolutely correct.
That's crazy.
So I don't know about you, but all these years in recovery, occasionally something from my past will pop up and I'll just go,
hold on. Are you saying Banksy was a horrible heroin addict for many years in England?
No. I was, right?
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. He was very opposed to, he didn't want that. He cares about people. Right?
Was he very bright? Was he as bright as his work seems
Absolutely.
to be?
I've never seen anyone with a work ethic like that guy. He never stops.
Right.
It blew my mind. We haven't seen each other for a while. I don't want to go into some big Banksy thing, but if there's a better kind of example of how dumb addiction can make someone, although to be fair, this was before he became what he became. But I do have these moments in my life, particularly when perhaps I haven't got much money and I just sort of think about that. Mate, there's no money in graffiti. Now, the flip side of that is, had I said, yeah, okay, let's do it, 20% of everything you were about to make, I'd be dead.
Right.
Simple. I'd be fucking dead.
It's a road we didn't get to travel.
Thank
you know
God.
what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a question that we can never answer, but it's really cool because his career is so crazy and his art is so smart and beautiful, and so many people have stories where they travel and they're the Forrest Gump of this.
Yeah.
You're the Forrest Gump of England in the 90s, 2000s.
Well,
junkie version.
Here's what I'll say about him. So obviously our paths went very different ways because I was still years away from actually getting and staying clean. And then in 2020, so I was, long time clean at that point. A mutual friend of ours, Banksy and mine, just sent me this text. He said, "Oh look, blah blah blah." He's asked, "How you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm doing okay." This was just before lockdown happened. I said, "I want to make an album with my band, but I want to put a new band together. I want everyone to be in recovery. I want to demonstrate to people that, if you're a creative person, a musician or whatever, that, maybe your best work is yet to come if you get clean, right?" So he relayed this message, and Banksy gave me a piece of his art and said, "Listen, if you sell that, you can make your album." And I did. And we made an album.
That's so cool. And Banksy's the cover?
No, I wish. It might have fucking sold some copies if it was. He gave me, it wasn't like, I didn't become rich, right? It was enough. He's smart. He knew it was a print, but it was a print that gave me enough money when I sold it to pay every musician that was involved in the Hightown Pirates album.
Oh, wow.
And go in the studio, and my band is called Hightown Pirates. We've made 3 albums. This was the second one. And I just wanted to have that experience of being in a studio with people that are all clean, in recovery of whatever persuasion, you know what I mean, whatever recovery means to them, but sober. And we made an album, and he was good to his word, and he paid for that album. And no one listened to it, but I guess that's not the point. Anyway, I'm waffling a bit. I forgot.
You're not waffling. This is awesome. I want to hear how you caught the magic bullet of sobriety.
All right, so here's what happens.
Cleanliness.
So here's what happened. So we get to the beginning of 2006. So this is 7 rehabs, 14 detoxes, a couple of jumping on an airplane, taking my fucking sorry ass to another part of the world, going cold turkey, coming home, using the first day I got home or whatever. I went to see my local drug agency in London at that time. I had my key worker, and I went to see her. I'm like, you've got to help me. I need to go to Detox again. I can't carry on. I'm going to kill myself. And she just looked across the table and she went, when are you going to help your fucking self, mate? Right? This is like, and I was like, as you can imagine, deeply offended by this bullet of truth delivered by someone that was, a qualified alcohol worker, and I just said, I just walked out. I copped a big resentment, and I went and used. I'm like, fuck them. They don't know what it's like for me. They weren't abused, all this shit, right? I get an opportunity to travel to Spain, where I had some friends, and I knew where they lived. I knew there was a lot of there, but I thought, if I'm going to die, I want to die with a suntan in southern Spain and just go and drink myself to death with cheap fucking wine and whatever. And I go to this part of Spain, and I don't know about you, but I had a few things on my mental checklist that I would never do to get money for right? There was still a couple of things left at that point. Not many, whatever moral compass I may or may not have had, there was a couple of things that I was not going to do. And in that last 3 months, I did them all. Again and again and again. I don't need to say what they are. It's not really relevant because everyone's morality might be different from mine. But the long shot of it is that this place that I was living was the home to some pretty heavy-duty British gangsters that were, on the run, had a nice little thing going there. They didn't want some fucking mess of a human being, baiting everything up because I was just causing chaos. Everywhere, it was just chaos. And I get a visit from this guy one night. I'm living in this caravan, and he's got a fucking shotgun. And he's like, you've got 24 hours to leave or I'm back tomorrow and you're dead. And I knew he wasn't joking. Made a couple of phone calls. So I called Banksy. I got the money that I needed to get the flight home. He sent that over electronically. And then once I got that money, I called my sister because I need some more money now to get some I told her the same story, and I got the money anyway, and I had a big fucking use up. I somehow got back to the UK. I stumbled around London for a couple of weeks. My ex-wife got hold of me, and she said that my sister was trying to speak to me and wanted to speak to me, and could I call her? And I phoned her up, and she put my then 10-year-old nephew on the phone. He's 27 now. He said to me, Uncle Simon, can you please take me ice skating for my 10th birthday before you die? And I'm 10 in 2 weeks. And my sister got on the phone. She went, that's the deal. He's 10 in 2 weeks. You need to take him ice skating before you die. You need to come here in 2 weeks, right? And you need to come here and you need to be clean, completely clean. No methadone, no booze, no weed, nothing. And if you can't do that, that's it. The fact that with my sister, she had 4 kids, my mum, we're done. We're absolutely done. Don't bother calling us again. You got 2 weeks. So I went and used, obviously, to get, and I found myself a couple of days later in my now ex-wife's apartment. She'd agreed that I could stay there. And if I used, she'd throw me out. If I stole anything, she'd call the police. They put this ultimatum. So I have a big old hit. I go over there. I'm high. Of course I'm going to stop using tomorrow, right? I'm fucking out of my mind on heroin. The next day, it didn't seem like such a good idea, right? But I'm in this spot. I ring up the NA helpline. And I speak to someone on the phone and I say, listen, where's the nearest meeting? And they said it's wherever it was. And I've shared this story so many times in meetings. It took me nearly 3 hours to walk there, and today I could probably do it in 20 minutes. I mean, I was yellow, I was covered in abscesses, I was feral, and I went to that NA meeting, and I've been clean ever since.
Do you remember, one thing that bothers me or that I struggle with is because obviously we both deal with people who are struggling and people who are using and people who can't get better. And we have a story where we showed up at a meeting and everything changed. Like, is there anything you can tell anybody about what changed that could help them, or is it just what happened to you?
So what had changed at that point was that, I'm sorry to sound so predictable, but I ran out of believing my own bullshit.
It's not predictable.
You know, I just ran out of, my bullshit generator was finished, because it was always my own bullshit. It wasn't, you know, and I was at a point where I knew that day, you know, because all that happened in that meeting was that someone who knew me said, hello, it's nice to see you. Do you want a cup of tea? And they gave me a hug. And no one had said it's nice to see me for fucking years, because it wasn't. No one pulled out a basic text and told me to find God and work the steps. They just went, fucking nice to see you, man. How are you, right? I mean, I'm like, I don't know what, I'm like 110 pounds, you know, fucking covered in abscesses, out at the bar for 3 months. The guy says, how are you? I'm going, yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. I was about as far from fine as you could possibly be.
I guess it's like, and you can't even answer this question, like Annie, who we were talking about, who died this summer. She turned up at every 12-step meeting there was in so many bad conditions and decided the same thing. Yeah. And then, you know, all the cliches took her will back. You know, she had such a hard time with the dogma. With like, because who are we? You know what I mean? We're these defiant addicts who do what we want and like think everything is bullshit. And then at some point we catch a little bit of this sobriety, this spirituality. And like, I know for me, I was in exactly the same spot, but I wasn't jaundiced or anything, but somebody told me they were happy to see me, or they said to me, we'd love it if you came back tomorrow, was the phrase that changed my whole life. Yeah. We'd love it if you came back tomorrow. Yeah. And I was like, I'll do it. And then I heard, you know, rarely had we seen someone thoroughly follow the path and not achieve these results. And I was like, I'd never done anything. So it's like I'd never done anything thoroughly besides used. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. And now I'm, you know, I just had 9 years and who knows how long I'll be able to keep it going. And I'm very happy with where my life is. And it's a miracle.
Just for the day,
I love
right?
it. Yeah. Right.
Here's the thing. You asked me, can I say something that might help someone, right?
Yeah.
Nobody gave me a fucking chance. Nobody. And so on that resentment, I got fucking 30 days. Nobody gave me a chance. No one thought.
So open that up. How do we turn that into something like somebody, because I hear from people constantly who are like, I don't want to do it. Like, I can't do it. Right. It sucks.
So, you know, I was at a point where whatever I used it just wasn't doing it anymore. And it'd been like that for a long time. Like you, I'd never really applied myself, right? But it was this perfect storm of, I don't know what else to do. I've tried everything else. You know, I arrived, like it says in the readings, in desperation, right? I tried everything else. The only thing I hadn't done was die. I'd come close, you know. And I just ran out of bullshit. I had nowhere else to go. I mean, literally nowhere else to go. And I walked into, you know, Narcotics Anonymous, and people were like, it's nice to see you. And they, you know, I mean, the cold tea and the stale biscuits, I fucking love that shit, you know. The God stuff, whatever, you know what I mean? But no one told me I had to do anything. They're just like you, they said, come back tonight, you know, and they gave me some love, and that's what I needed. I just needed, at that point in time, I needed some love, because I had none for myself, none whatsoever. And I believed them when they said, it's nice to see you.
Yeah, and did the God stuff come in time, or was it still just like this is no,
not really.
So all right, so how do you stay? I mean, how many years you have?
18.
Right, it's a long time. You have 18 years, and the God stuff is not the number one thing. So
not even number 10.
Okay, so like, to somebody who's like, I don't want to get sober, it's too much fucking God shit, what do you say to them?
I say, yeah, I agree. I listen, my understanding of a power greater than myself is knowledge and power, right? Because knowledge as Malcolm X said, is power, right? Maybe it wasn't Malcolm X. I'm just trying to make myself sound cool.
That sounds cool.
It's not the kind of thing you would say. Anyway, so my understanding of a power greater than myself is people that have done things that I didn't think I could do and got through it clean, right? And their lived experience. And I stay close to that lived experience. And where do I find it? I find it in meetings. Am I an atheist? No. Do I believe in a benevolent, loving creationist God? Absolutely fucking not. Do I find a kind of particular energy when I'm with the tribe? Yes, I do. Have I worked the steps? Yes, I have. Can you do that without believing in God? Yes, you can. I've got a sponsee that does believe in God. I've got one that's very much like me. They're both years clean. Whatever. You know what I mean? There's room for us all.
Beautiful. And what are you up to now, Simon?
Well, right now, I actually have to go in a minute because I'm about to go and see a Polish film with my wife.
Nice.
That was filmed. I live in Margate, which is just outside London. If I may, what I do these days is I'm a recovery coach. SimonMason.net. That's where you'll find me. I'm a musician. I'm a published author. My daughter's 16. She's just got her first boyfriend. I've stayed clean through that fucking shit show. Like, I haven't killed him yet. No. I don't want to kill him. He's actually quite nice, right? I've been at 25 funerals. I've buried most of my friends in recovery. A lot of them have died. They haven't made it. You know, I lost my mum last year, and you know, tomorrow I'm going to watch my football team, Liverpool. I'm going to travel down to Brighton and go and watch Liverpool play. The day after that, I'm going to go and see Big Star. Well, Jodie from Big Star and Mike Mills from REM are doing like a 50th anniversary of Big Star's second album. Then I'm going up to Liverpool for a job to coach someone. Then I'm going to go and watch Liverpool play football again. I mean, I used to sit outside a fucking cash machine going, mate, can you spare me £1?
And now you're living it. Now you're out there. Go enjoy your movie. Simon, thank you so much for your time. I loved hearing your story and talking to you. And if you ever need anything from me, please let me know. Listen,
I promised my daughter a trip to New York, right? And it's going to happen in the next 12 months or so. But we'll speak again soon, right? Because I was banned from America for 30 years because of what happened all those years ago. They gave me, I mean, talk about don't leave before the miracle happens. I got permission to travel last year. Baby, I'm back.
Well, welcome back. Did you have fun on the show? Was this good for you, or was this a
great
drag?
No, it was great. Right. It was lovely.
Thank you so much, Simon.
Fox Space Alpha, one of my favorite albums, by the way. I got it on vinyl back there. Wilco.
Yeah, right. I saw them. I like Wilco, but the show was a little bit snoozy. My wife was pissed that I thought it was too snoozy. Yeah. But I like Jeff. I want Jeff Tweedy on the show. During COVID, I could get famous people on the show, and now I can't get famous people on the show, and it's making me feel less than.
Let me see what I can do about our friend Mr. Townshend. All right.
All right, Simon. I appreciate you, man. If you need
anything,
thanks for having me.
We'll speak again soon.
Pleasure. Awesome. Thank you so much. Dude.